design. Like, why? Couldn't you have stayed true to the overall level design of the overall stage? Well, I guess not. Also, the Mach speed sections can be a little annoying, and it shows Sonic 06's very cheap difficulty. I don't necessarily hate the Mach speed sections like everyone else does, but it's still really horrible. Like, for God's sake. My God. Well, anyways, yeah. That's pretty much all my problems for Sonic's story. The controls are a bit of a mess. Not the absolute worst controls in the series, but it's still annoying. Also, I'm not able to show footage right here, but for some reason, you can't just jump on enemies anymore. This could be something having to do with some sort of skill ceiling, like for Sonic that Sonic 06 was trying to do, but I don't know. No, it's just so weird to me that you can only use a special ability to kill an enemy. Like, just look at that. Look at that. You have to use a homing attack instead of just jumping on an enemy, or a special attack from a certain character. I really don't know why this is, and something like this really confuses me. Also, the spin dash is just as useless as it was in Shadow the Hedgehog. And now we have Shadow. Now, one thing in Shadow's gameplay that I'm really disappointed that returned is the vehicles. Why? Nobody really liked the vehicles in Shadow the Hedgehog. Why did they have to return? I'll give them slack for making them working a lot better than Shadow the Hedgehog, but still, what gives? Now, Silver's story. Now this is the most controversial part about Sonic 06. I actually don't really hate Silver's story. I mean, I'm able to explore my surroundings, and while there are certain aspects while taking down enemies can be a little bit of a hassle, it's still kind of nice to explore my surroundings. In fact, I think it's about time I go over the big positives about Sonic 06. Believe it or not, guys, I actually like quite a bit of aspects from this game, despite how heavily flawed it is. I actually like Sonic stages, and to be honest, they're actually my favorite part about the game. I know, pretty expected. Sonic's level design is actually stays true to what Sonic should be, despite some dumb aspects like the waiting for speed, like I just mentioned. His level designs are pretty cool, especially Crisis Cities. I also love the variety of characters in this game, and despite Shadow and Silver's story being more flawed than Sonic's, there's still at least something in those stages that I can actually enjoy. Like I said, I'm able to explore my surroundings without too many things getting in my way. This is actually something that I like in my Sonic games, despite it being really annoying. And despite being really annoying from time to time because of the control not being perfect. I also really like the boss fights. Yeah, believe it or not, this is actually an aspect of Sonic 06 that I actually kind of like compared to Sonic Adventure 1 and 2. However, However, that's the only part of the gameplay that I like more. Everything else about the gameplay is just a downgrade to the previous Sonic games, aside from Shadow. You want to know another thing that I think this game is better than Adventure 1 and 2? The soundtrack. I love this soundtrack a lot. This is definitely my third favorite soundtrack in the entire series, with Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Frontiers being my two favorites. All in all, Sonic 06 really isn't that bad compared to what a lot of people may say. It still is bad, all things considered, but considering for what it is, I'm able to say that I actually don't hate this game. In fact, I do kinda like it. Judge me not, will you? Anyways, let's move on to the good Sonic games. Wow, this video is going a lot longer than I thought. I might need to speed this up. Anyways, yeah. Now we're going on to the good Sonic games on this tier list. From B tier to S tier. We now have... As I said, Sonic Advance 2 is my favorite game from the Advance trilogy. I actually like this game quite a bit. I don't love it, but I also don't hate it. But I just can't hate it. Yeah. For one thing, the level design actually shows a somewhat skill ceiling. And I actually prefer this game. And I actually prefer this game over the and like I said, the level design is actually not that empty. There's actually some things that you can do in these levels. I also like the fact that Cream the Rabbit got introduced into this game. The story that this game is able to introduce is also really cool too. Also, some of the levels' atmospheres are really good, and the soundtrack is actually pretty good too. And the bosses are my favorite of the Advanced trilogy. The only thing keeping it from any of my favorites is solely because of the fact that I just personally like the other games more. There might be some games on this list that are slightly more flawed, but the positives are a bit more. Otherwise, Sonic Advance 2 is a pretty solid game. I definitely give it a try. Right. Although it's probably the only Sonic Advance game I'd recommend to play. The game that started it all. You guys might be a little bit surprised that Sonic 1 isn't higher on this list. However, I do kind of think that this game is a bit more flawed than the other classic games. For one thing, while Marble Zone isn't half bad, it's definitely one of the more weaker zones in the game. And the special stages does leave a very weird impression, albeit still not the worst special stages in the series, far from it. Also, the Labyrinth and Scrap Brain just kinda sucks. But aside from that, the game is good. This game actually has some good things about it. I really love Green Hill Zone. I even like Spring Yard Zone. And Starlight Zone. Oh my god. Starlight Zone is beautiful. And the final boss, it does leave a pretty satisfying thing to add. All in all, Sonic the Hedgehog 1 is a very solid experience, although I wouldn't say it's any of my favorites considering the flaws that it sometimes have. boy, Sonic and the Black Knight. This game is, in my opinion, the most underrated Sonic game. I understand why it kind of gets some hate, but I don't know, man. Sonic and the Black Knight is a really good game. Not quite great, but good. Really good. Good. For one thing, the sword combat is actually really cool, and the concept that this game that it gives in is just spectacular. I also really love the story. The story is very lighthearted while being very serious and very motivating. I also think Merlina is actually a really good twist villain. And King Arthur is just nothing. Also, like Sonic and the Secret Rings, this game actually has good graphics for a Wii title, and the soundtrack is really great. Seriously, I can't get enough of the soundtrack. It is just good. My two complaints about Sonic and the Black Knight, though, is that on more occasions than not, the level design does kind of get a bit linear, but at the same time, you are able to murder as many enemies as you like. So I can't really be that mad about the linear level design, and I also can't really be mad at the controls because it is a lot better than Secret Rings. But it's still is kind of hard to do for certain players. But I could still see certain players having a fun time despite of these flaws. I would even consider Sonic and the Black Knight to be a very approachable game. Like, yeah, the controls are really weird, but at the same time, there's actually some potential of you getting used to the controls. And the controls really aren't, and like I said, the controls are not perfect. I'm saying they're better than Secret Rings, but they're still kind of poor. Thankfully, there is potential of able to be getting used to it, and despite the linearity of these level designs, they can be very speedy, and these level designs actually don't last too long. All in all, Sonic and the Black Knight is very underrated. The most underrated Sonic game I've ever seen. Now we move on to the A tier of Sonic games. All of these games are great, and I recommend you check all of them out. Anyways, starting off, Sonic Lost World. This game is also a very underrated game. However, I don't think it's quite as underrated as Black Knight, but it's still underrated. There are some fans that are willing to show their love for Sonic Lost World, including myself, but most fans, including the general audience, it does tend to show some hate for the game. Now I have covered the 3DS version of Sonic Lost World, and while I still think that version is good, I still think the Wii version is much better. I mean, come on. I think at least some of us can agree with that. For one thing, the level design is really cool. I agree with people that it's too inspired by Mario, and that is my biggest complaint about the game overall. Seriously, the Mario inspiration is really stupid. I really hate it. The 3D sections in this game are both 3D and 2D sections in this game are actually really good. Despite my soft spot for Sonic Lost World 3DS, I hated the 3D sections in that game so much. In fact, I literally had to uninstall the 3DS version from my phone. It's still a good Sonic game on the 3DS, but Oh, but compared to the Wii version, yeah, get this version, man, and it is much more worth your time. All in all, Sonic Lost World it can be a bit of a dumpster fire when it comes to teaching, which is another complaint I do have with the game. And I actually don't have a complaint with anything else about the game. Yes, I'm actually gonna let the story off the slide because, believe it or not, I actually don't hate the story that much. It's just a lighthearted, simple story with some missed potential, but I'm able to let it slide. And it's genuinely a part of Sonic Lost World that I genuinely don't understand why people hate it. I respect people that still hate it up to this day, but I don't know, man. And like, I just love Sonic Lost World. The boss fights are really good. And the soundtrack is really awesome. All in all, despite Sonic Lost World not being one of my absolute favorites, I still really enjoy this game. In fact, I love it. But because of some flaws that has, it has to be torn down a bit. Still a great Sonic game though. That's something I will forever fight for. Sonic Rush Adventure. This game is very forgettable. It is very forgettable, like the first Rush, but I can still really enjoy it. There's actually quite some parts that I like about Sonic Rush Adventure, despite the mechanics not being nearly as well used as the first Rush. The gameplay is still really cool. The level design may not be... the level design is more linear than... is a little bit more linear than the first Rush, but it's still fun. The mechanics are pretty creative, and there's actually a good portion of good levels. Seriously, I can't get enough of it. It is a little confusing at certain points, but once you get the hang of it, it can be a fun ride. The soundtrack is pretty cool. And it does have a fair share of bangers, although I prefer the first Rush a little bit more. Not to mention, the story is very charming. Not quite as good as the first Rush, but it's still good. I will agree with fans that Sonic Rush Adventure is very forgettable, which is why it's kind of low, compared to some of my other favorite Sonic games. But other than that, Sonic Rush Adventure is a great Sonic game. As I said, I prefer the first Sonic Rush a little bit more. But both of them are still good games though. Sonic Rush is the first game to introduce a very special formula that we know to this day. We'll get to there later. Okay, actually I'll just get into it now. The Boost to Win formula. Yeah. If it weren't for this game, we wouldn't have gotten the Boost to Win formula that we all love. Sonic Rush Adventure is a fantastic Sonic game, and I love it quite a bit. It may not be one of the absolute big boys, but it's still up. It's still up there. God, my throat. Story and soundtrack really good, and the bosses are really fun. Not much more you could say on Sonic Rush, really. It's just a really good Sonic game. I knew some of you were expecting this to be somewhere close to the games I love. I love Sonic Heroes.
it may not be quite up there with my top 10 favorites, but Sonic Heroes is just wow. There is so many good things about this game. I'll just get the negatives out of the way, and these are the reasons why it's not up the top 10. Sonic Heroes is a bit lacking when it comes to controls. As I said earlier, I'm able to deal with these controls, but they're still really annoying. And along as well, Team Chaotix is just not fun at all, and the special stages are horrible. But aside from that, the game is awesome. Sure, there are some. Sure, the negatives I just said shine in very hard, but the level designs are pretty cool, and the act by act structure is actually pretty refreshing to see again. And the team mechanic is really cool. The speed character is basically the one for speed. The flying character is basically, well, flight, although speed is kind of atrocious. And the combat character is basically your Chuck Norris of the group. Stole that line from Honest Biggums. Or was it Some Call Me Johnny? God damn it, I can't remember. Anyways, back to the review. Well, ranking. back to the ranking. Sonic Heroes has great level designs and stunning music, a charming story. What more can you ask for? This game, it rocks. Like I said though, this game is kind of flawed with the flaws I did just say, and the bosses could be a lot better. But other than that, Sonic Heroes is awesome. Just not perfect. Now we go in to my top 10 favorite Sonic games. We come from great to nearly perfect. Starting off the road. Yeah, I bet you guys weren't expecting this on the list, were ya? Yeah. Sonic CD is a game that I hold a lot of love for. I know I said before that I prefer Sonic 1 over it. But before I did prefer this game over Sonic 1, but then I switched it. Anyways, yeah. Why do I place a game like this above Sonic Heroes? Well, let me tell you. I have more experience with Sonic CD than Sonic Heroes. I actually find Sonic CD to be more replayable than Sonic Heroes. It may be short, although not as short as Sonic 1, it's still a very nice and short experience. It does have those questionable special stages from time to time, but aside from that, the game is awesome. The exploration is perfect. This game has fantastic stage variety. Like, you have the past, present, and future, which gives you entirely new looks and entirely new themes that makes you feel either happy, neutral, or guilty. The final boss does kinda suck, but aside from that, Sonic CD is awesome. With its nearly perfected level design, with the exception of a couple levels, fantastic soundtrack. In fact, it's my favorite soundtrack for the classic era. And my God, the storytelling. While I do believe Sonic the Hedgehog 3 does slightly better storytelling, the storytelling in this game is, dare I say, perfect. I don't care what people say about Sonic CD being mediocre at best. I'm going to love this game, whether you guys like it or not. This game will always be one of my personal favorites, and yeah. I bet you guys were expecting Sonic the Hedgehog 2 to be somewhere on the top 10. And yeah, it's something that I think a lot of Sonic fans can agree on, that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is a big improvement over Sonic 1. I love this game so much. It's a masterpiece. For one thing, the level design actually supports Sonic. Unlike Sonic the Hedgehog 1, where only have half the stages being good. This game actually has a good portion of these stages that are actually good. And some of these levels are some of my personal favorites, too. While the game can be a little bit punishing at certain times, it sometimes forces you to get better at the game. And I really like that about Sonic 2. Too. The ending of it just makes you feel so satisfied, and the music, woof! The music rocks. Not as good as Sonic CD, but still really nice to listen to. My only complaint about Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is the special stages. They're horrible. Not as bad as the ones in Sonic Heroes, but it's still bad. Thankfully, the stages are good enough to carry the entire game through. Finally, another 3D Sonic game on the list. Seriously, I've been missing it. Anyways, Sonic Colors is phenomenal. Whether it being on the Wii U or Ultimate, I am able to have myself a fun time in whether which version I talk about. This game is fantastic. While the story may not be anything special, everything else about the game is